June 8, 1967. In broad daylight, a U.S. Navy spy ship is attacked, straffed by fighter jets, torpedoed in international waters. The crew screams over the radio, "We are American!" But the assault doesn't stop. 34 sailors are slaughtered, 172 wounded, and the attackers? America's closest ally. This was no accident. Israel knew exactly what they were doing, and the U.S. government helped cover it up. Classified documents prove Israeli pilots identified the USS Liberty's American flag before bombing it anyway. Survivors describe war crimes, life rafts shot to pieces, sailors gunned down in the water. And when U.S. fighter jets scrambled to help, Defense Secretary McNamara ordered them to turn back. For decades, the truth was buried. Survivors were threatened. Official reports were falsified. Even Medal of Honor citations were edited to hide who really attacked that ship. Now, declassified tapes and whistleblower testimony expose the deadliest lie of all. This wasn't a tragic mistake. It was a massacre, and the U.S. helped Israel get away with murder. But before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. The USS Liberty served as a CIA-operated intelligence vessel, intercepting communications from all parties engaged in the 1967 Six-Day War. It tracked both Israeli advances and the movements of the Arab alliance, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, collectively called the United Arab Republic. Israel's victory led to its control of Sinai, Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. However, Israeli intelligence falsely informed Admiral Issi Rahar, head of the Israeli Navy, that a ship had shelled El Arish in Sinai. This claim was later exposed as fabricated. The sole vessel in the vicinity was the USS Liberty, flying the U.S. flag and positioned in international waters. On June 8th, Israeli forces launched an assault on the ship, resulting in 34 American deaths and 172 injuries out of the 294 crew members. Both President Lyndon B. Johnson and the Israeli government later labeled the incident a tragic error. Notably, the U.S. had publicly declared days earlier at the UN that it had no warships near the conflict zone. Yet the Liberty had been deployed to observe the fighting. Due to a breakdown in U.S. communications, the ship never received orders to stay at least 100 miles from the coast, instead moving within 14 miles of Sinai. Israeli officials, including Colonel Shmuel Kislev, Air Force Operations, and General Yeshayahu Ben-Ket, Air Force Intelligence, were also alerted to the alleged attack on El Arish. Kislev instructed his pilots that they could strike the vessel if confirmed as military. Meanwhile, naval forces remained on high alert. Ben-Ket insisted on verifying the ship's identity before any action. Israeli Mirage jets conducted a flyby, with the lead pilot identifying the ship as American. Despite this, another wave of fighters attacked at 2:05 p.m., strafing the Liberty with gunfire, rockets, and cannons for 20 minutes. One pilot reported seeing oil leaking from the damaged hull. Aboard the Liberty, radio men Terry Halberdier and Glenn Oliphant, following their captain's orders, sent distress signals in the open, reporting an attack by unknown forces after their antennas were damaged. They rigged a manual fix and resumed broadcasting when jamming disrupted secure channels. The Sixth Fleet received the SOS, prompting Captain Joseph Tully of the USS Saratoga to scramble 12 F-4 Phantoms for rescue. Simultaneously, the U.S. Moscow hotline was activated to clarify the jets were only assisting the Liberty, not engaging in the war. However, as the Phantoms neared the ship, Defense Secretary Robert McNamara inexplicably ordered their recall, an action only possible with presidential approval. Johnson's involvement suggested he was complicit in the cover-up. After the Phantoms withdrew, Israeli supermystères arrived, armed with napalm and cluster bombs. One pilot radioed that the ship's marking was Charlie Tango Romeo 5 and noted no visible flag, contradicting earlier reconnaissance confirming it as an American vessel. Many suspect this radio transmission was staged by the Israelis to provide plausible deniability in case outside observers recorded the assault. When the message went out, Colonel Kislev immediately called off further airstrikes, recognizing the vessel's American call sign. However, torpedo boat commander Moshe Oren claimed he never received any abort order. Instead, he was told the target was the Egyptian freighter El Qusair. Acting on this misinformation, he ordered 3 torpedo boats to engage. Despite the supposed ceasefire after the second wave of jets, the naval units allegedly never got the stand-down command. They fired 6 torpedoes, 5 of which missed. The single hit killed 25 sailors and wounded dozens more. This narrative remains hotly contested. Israel's claim of mistaken identity collapses under scrutiny. If they truly thought the ship was Egyptian, why jam U.S. encrypted frequencies, which operate on unique bandwidths? Another glaring inconsistency is the Liberty's size. At 10,150 tons, it dwarfed the supposed Egyptian counterpart by a factor of 5, with completely dissimilar silhouettes, further undermining Israel's accident defense. Why were the attacking jets stripped of all national markings, violating international law? Had McNamara not recalled the Saratoga's F-4 Phantoms, the torpedo boats would never have closed in, sparing most casualties. Officially, the U.S. accepted Israel's explanation that they admitted fault and ceased fire, prompting McNamara's recall order. Yet attacks resumed for another 80 minutes, contradicting Israel's claim. Stranger still, the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv reported Israel was still unsure of the ship's nationality during the assault. If so, how did McNamara know it was the Liberty, justifying the Phantom recall? After repairs, the Liberty's crew rebroadcast their SOS, now picked up by the USS America, which dispatched rescue ships. Sailors launched 3 life rafts, but the torpedo boats deliberately destroyed 2 and raked the decks with gunfire to suppress evacuation, a blatant Geneva Convention breach, aside from attacking a neutral ship in international waters. Post-attack, the crew sailed to Malta, where Rear Admiral Isaac Kidd bizarrely ordered survivors to remove the ship's name from their uniforms and even wear civilian clothes, which they weren't issued. They were gagged under threat of court-martial or worse. Participants on both sides offered conflicting accounts. Among them was Navy Captain Dr. Richard Kiefer, wounded yet laboring for 28 straight hours to save lives, earning the Silver Star. Captain William McGonigal received the Medal of Honor for leading the ship through 13 attack waves after his bridge crew was killed, and he himself severely injured. He recalled Israeli aircraft striking from all angles in coordinated assaults. The involvement of both Israeli air and naval forces points to a premeditated, government-sanctioned operation. Military units don't accidentally attack unidentified vessels, let alone American ones, without top-down authorization. Crew members insist reconnaissance planes flew close enough for pilots to make visual contact, leaving no doubt about the Liberty's identity. Numerous high-ranking U.S. military and government officials were aware at the time that the assault on the USS Liberty was intentional. The central question remained: why? The extent of the cover-up that followed was staggering. For instance, news outlets were fed limited information to minimize public awareness of the incident. Survivors were forced into sworn secrecy, and Admiral Merlin Starling, the Navy's Judge Advocate General, was given a mere 24 hours to review the 600-page Court of Inquiry report, an investigation he later admitted he deeply distrusted. In fact, the Navy's inquiry deliberately excluded critical evidence. No testimony was permitted regarding the unmarked Israeli aircraft, the deliberate strafing of life rafts, the jamming of U.S. communications, or Defense Secretary McNamara's unprecedented recall of the rescue mission. This investigation set a disturbing precedent, the first and only time in U.S. history that a military inquiry refused testimony from American survivors while accepting statements from their attackers. Crewman Bill LeMay experienced this suppression firsthand. He was forcibly removed from a hospital ward, given the alias Smith, and confined to a private room where a naval officer warned him never to speak of the Liberty again. The cover-up extended to falsified official records. Both Senate Archives and the Medal of Honor Society falsely listed Captain McGonagall's medal as being awarded for actions in Vietnam, not the Sinai Peninsula. His citation conspicuously omitted any geographic details or identification of the attacking force. Even the Liberty's logs were altered to support Israel's timeline, falsely claiming the attack lasted only 50 minutes, with a 20-minute pause, rather than the actual 2-hour assault. These fabrications beg the question, why such an elaborate deception? Over time, evidence suggests Israel knew the Liberty was intercepting all regional communications, including Israeli military operations in the Golan Heights and Sinai. NSA Director Marshall Carter later stated he believed the attack was deliberate, as sinking the ship and eliminating witnesses was Israel's only way to conceal their actions. This theory is corroborated by CIA transcripts shared with the U.S. ambassador to Lebanon, which prove Israeli pilots identified the Liberty as American before attacking. Their command center explicitly overrode these warnings, ordering the assault to proceed. These transmissions were also captured by an NSAEC 121 surveillance plane, confirming Israel's full awareness of the ship's identity. Israeli forces openly acknowledged in their operational communications that they clearly saw the American flag flying on the Liberty during the attack. This critical fact was confirmed by both aerial and naval units involved in the assault, directly contradicting Israel's official claims of mistaken identity. Later revelations exposed the true motivation behind the decision to sink the Liberty and eliminate its crew. Moshe Dayan, serving as Israel's defense minister and commander of all military forces, personally authorized the attack. This order stemmed from disturbing practices occurring in the field, where Israeli commanders had been given discretionary authority to execute Egyptian prisoners of war rather than expend resources transporting and securing them. Prominent Israeli military historian Uri Milstein documented multiple instances during the 1967 conflict where Egyptian soldiers were killed by Israeli troops after surrendering. While not formal policy, Milstein described an unspoken tolerance for such actions. Some unit commanders chose to implement these measures while others refused, but the practice was widely known throughout the ranks, he stated. Recently declassified Israeli military records reveal that on June 11, 1967, just days after the Liberty attack, the IDF General Staff urgently circulated new directives regarding prisoner treatment. The emergency order explicitly stated, due to contradictory existing orders, the following clarification is issued. 1. No surrendered soldiers or civilians shall be harmed under any circumstances. 2. Armed combatants or civilians who refuse to surrender may be engaged with lethal force. Violations of these orders will result in severe disciplinary action. This sudden policy reversal clearly represents damage control, undoubtedly originating from Dayan's office. The timing coincides precisely with Israel's realization that the Liberty had survived the attack and that intercepted communications might expose their unlawful battlefield conduct. The directive reads as a transparent attempt to establish plausible deniability regarding potential war crimes, especially given the Liberty's confirmed role as an intelligence collection platform. Israel's international credibility was already precarious following their controversial preemptive strikes against Arab air bases, justified by disputed intelligence claims of imminent Arab attacks. Senior U.S. officials, including President Johnson and Defense Secretary McNamara, certainly understood these strategic complexities. The motivation for the subsequent cover-up becomes clear when considering the geopolitical stakes. The United States couldn't risk its key Middle Eastern ally being implicated in war crimes investigations. American and NATO interests strongly favored an Israeli victory, which would diminish Soviet influence over the United Arab Republic coalition, comprising Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, and potentially discourage Saudi financial support for these Soviet-aligned states. Protecting Israel's reputation served these crucial Cold War objectives, regardless of the liberty's tragic cost. The strategic importance of an Israeli victory extended to maintaining open access to the Suez Canal, a critical waterway that served American and NATO interests. This crucial factor provided compelling motivation for the United States to conceal the truth about the incident. Official accounts from American authorities presented conflicting narratives, with some dismissing evidence of executed Egyptian prisoners as motivation for the assault, while maintaining the position that the Liberty attack resulted from accidental misidentification. These contradictory claims formed an integral component of the broader concealment effort. Subsequent investigations revealed mass graves containing the bodies of slain Egyptian soldiers, compelling the Israeli government to eventually provide compensation to victims' families. The record shows that in May 1968, Israel disbursed $3.32 million, equivalent to $30.66 million in 2025 currency, to the U.S. government as restitution for the 34 sailors killed in the assault. Additional payments followed in March 1969, when Israel allocated $3.57 million, valued at $31.25 million in 2025 terms, to compensate wounded survivors. The final settlement occurred in December 1980, with Israel agreeing to pay $6 million, $23.4 million in 2025 value, for physical damages to the Liberty itself, including 13 years of accumulated interest. For over 50 years, distinguished American military leaders, including multiple generals, admirals, and Medal of Honor recipients, have joined surviving crew members in demanding a comprehensive congressional inquiry into both the attack and subsequent cover-up. Despite their persistent efforts, the likelihood of such an investigation ever being conducted appears increasingly remote, given the passage of time and entrenched political considerations. The financial settlements, while substantial, were carefully structured as ex gratia payments rather than admissions of liability. This diplomatic approach allowed both nations to avoid formally acknowledging the disturbing truths surrounding the incident, while providing some measure of compensation to victims and their families. The continued refusal to authorize a full congressional investigation suggests this delicate arrangement will remain undisturbed, leaving many unanswered questions about one of the most controversial incidents in U.S. naval history.